Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very last coffee break of 2024. My name is Angela Andrew, and today we're going to go over organizing scanned photos, which is something that I know a lot of you do. Many of us have many types of media in our libraries, and those old family photos make up a big chunk of that. So today I'm going to walk you through organizing some of those and give you some ideas on best practices to get that job done. Before we jump in, I do want to let you know I think we have one more live event for you this year. That's going to be Lori's Ready, Set, Go session this afternoon. That's going to be at 3 p.m. Pacific time. So like I mentioned, this is our last coffee break of 2024. Lori and I will both be taking a hiatus from live events. We will be back with you on January 2nd, and we have a very full month of really cool things planned for you to kick off the new year, help you get organized with all those holiday photos and things like that. So make sure you check out the events section of the community. So you just go to community.mylio.com and /events. You're going to find everything we have going on for you planned out for January. We've got coffee breaks, we've got special webinars, all sorts of cool stuff. So make sure you check that out. And I hope you guys have a wonderful holiday break. Mylio will still be open and running for business. So if you have support questions, make sure you reach out directly to support, things like that. Like the business isn't closing, but Lori and I will be taking a hiatus from the live events. Before we move on to the topic today, just to remind you, you can give the gift of Mylio Photos. So I know shipping deadlines have mostly passed for buying those actual tangible gifts. But if you have a friend or family member who needs some help organizing their pictures, think about giving them the gift of Mylio Photos. The cool thing is you also get a couple of extra months on your subscription when you buy a gift card, so it's a win-win for everybody. Make sure you check that out at mylio.com/holidaygifts. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into today's presentation, and let me switch over to my slide deck here, and we're going to be talking about organizing scanned photos. So in preparation for this particular presentation, I actually spent some time this morning working on a photo album that I have of some scanned images. So I have 30 something images or so that we're going to organize together that are basically hot off the presses, so to speak, freshly scanned. And I'm going to show you how I handle them. Now there's many different ways you can go about this. I'm going to give you some options, and then I'm going to show you how I do it. So today we're going to talk about why you should organize your scanned photos. We're going to talk about how to get them into Mylio Photos, organizing tips, and then a few things that you can do to enhance and declutter that collection. Because as we are gathering more media, taking more pictures, all these things, it's an ongoing process, and we want to make sure that we are focusing on the best and preserving those memories. So let's go ahead and jump in to why we organize our scanned photos. And I think most of you are already aware of this, you know this, but the purpose for doing this is preserving those memories. We want to make sure that all of those pictures, those moments in time are preserved for future generations. So I'm going through right now taking scans of photos that were of my grandfather when he was young, which is pretty cool. And so those are things that, he's been gone for many years now. I can still talk to my grandma and get some background on those pictures, but pretty soon access to the details about those memories is going to be gone. And what I'm doing is helping preserve those, so they're around for me, they're around for the next generation, for my cousins, for their kids, and so forth. You also want to make sure that these things are not lost or forgotten. So, there's all sorts of reasons why pictures can be lost. I think in the past year, there's so many people who've had natural disasters and things like that. If you have them digitized and backed up off-site, that's a great way to make sure that they are not permanently lost. So there's so many people who lost everything in floods and hurricanes and all sorts of awful things this past year. And the lucky ones are the ones that had those things, for a variety of reasons. They had a backup somewhere, and those memories were not lost forever. So this is why we digitize things like our scanned photos. And not that we want to get rid of the prints, because the prints are obviously very precious as well, and having something tangible to hold on to is nice. But as long as we have that digital copy, and if we have an off-site backup, that means that if something happens to our home, those images are still preserved, and those memories, those moments in time are not forgotten. The other part of this is we want to simplify accessing them. So sometimes going and actually pulling a physical book off the shelf or a box of photos out of the closet, that's a bit more than a lot of people do. And a lot of those things end up tucked away and kind of forgotten. If we have them digitally, and especially if we have them in Mylio Photos, we can access them anytime. So when I'm over visiting my grandma or hanging out with my aunties, I can be like, hey, when was the last time you saw this photo? And I can pull up pictures on my phone of their childhood, which is really pretty cool. And at that same moment, I can get the stories behind those images and get a little bit more context and even enter that information on my phone. So it helps you quickly find those specific memories and photos when you need them. It also facilitates making easy to share collections for storytelling and different projects. So it's all about access and preservation. So let's talk about importing those digitized photos. There's a couple of different ways you can do this. You can add scanned images just like you would any other media in Mylio Photos. Meaning you go up to the Add Media menu, you choose that you want to add media accessible from this device, and you can link them or copy them. And just to kind of clarify, because this is something we get asked a lot, when you link a folder, that's telling Mylio to look at this new location. It's saying, add this new folder to my Mylio Photos library. It doesn't move it from where it's at, but you're going to see that folder now in the folders view in Mylio. It's the same folder. If you use the copy option, what this does is it takes a copy of the pictures in that folder and it puts them into a folder that already exists inside your Mylio Photos library. So again, if you go into that folders view, you find the folder where you want them to go. That is what copy does. It moves a copy of those images into a folder that already exists in your library. Another option is to link the default folder for your scanner. So when I show you my library here in a minute, I'll show you a couple of different ways I do this because I have 2 different scanners that I work with. But you can link that scanner's default folder to Mylio. So that way, as you're scanning media, it will be automatically brought into your Mylio Photos library. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when I go in and I show you the images that I want to bring here in a little bit here. Once we have them into Mylio, and again, we're going to do a little bit of hands-on of this at the end. I kind of just wanted to go through the outline and then we'll jump in and actually do it. So when you're first bringing your pictures in, you want to think about having a solid folder structure. Create hierarchies that are meaningful and relevant to you and your family. For example, you can do a year or decade, and an event. And let me pull on my pointer here just for a second. Let me make that sure that's on. That'll probably be a little easier for you guys to see as I move my mouse around. So you want to make sure you have a hierarchy. And on the next slide, I have some other examples. You also want to add missing metadata. So when we're scanning in pictures, the date on those photos is going to be the date that you scanned them. So once you get them into Mylio, you're going to want to alter that to reflect the appropriate time period. If you know the exact date and time, awesome. But most of us don't. So Mylio has lots of options for what we call fuzzy dates that let you do different time frames. So you can say it was during this season and this year, or even broader, it was part of this decade. So you can go ahead and set those approximate dates. You can add additional context like location, keywords, descriptions, those types of things. You can also tag people, which is something that a lot of us, I think, find really fulfilling in Mylio Photos, is being able to go through those images, especially those older ones, and make sure who is in that picture is documented. So when the next generation looks at those images, they're not going, they're not wondering what their connection is to this photo. They're going, oh, that's Aunt Jane, and oh, okay, that's who she was married to. Okay, now I see why she's relevant to me. So tagging people is also very important. Another optional step is to create custom albums in Mylio Photos. And that's a great way if you have like a year and decade folder structure to be able to group things into different areas. So you want to group things by certain events, by certain people, by certain branches of the family, without having to duplicate or physically move those images. Albums are a great way to have that kind of virtual organization. It also makes it really easy to share those images with family because you have access to shared albums, and you can create a semi-private link and website that you can send out to the friends and family to look at those images. I have to say that's one of the coolest things I've been able to do with the stuff that I've been scanning for my grandmother is creating that shared album, sending her the link, and when my 97-year-old grandmother can click on the link on her phone and she can see all of those pictures, It's so easy. She doesn't have to install anything. She doesn't have to have Mylio. She doesn't have to have any kind of extended technical knowledge. It's accessible for her. So putting things into albums can really make that job a lot easier. All right, so next, let's talk a little bit about some of those folder structure suggestions. One thing that a lot of people will do is have major family branches. So maybe you have a folder for the different sides of your family. So I have my paternal and my maternal side of the family. Those are the main folders that I have inside my family history folder. As I get in more pictures from my husband's side of the family, I'll do one for his side of the family, or maybe even break that up into his two parents. So you can make that as granular as you like. I tend to keep it very general because there's always going to be some level of overlap. I have a few family pictures where, guess what? Both my maternal and my paternal grandparents are in the same picture. Which folder do you put that in? It's kind of a judgment call. In that instance, it was I chose whose house they were at, which happened in that instance to be my paternal side of the family. But there's not really a hard line. And that's, again, where albums and that virtual organization can be really handy, because you don't want to necessarily be making duplicate physical copies of things, because that can get cluttered. It takes up a lot of extra storage. So using albums to virtually organize is very helpful. But back to our folder suggestions. So I do this maternal paternal side, and then underneath that you can use major events, and otherwise just have kind of a grouping of all of your pictures. And as you browse through Mylio Photos, Mylio is going to put things on the calendar in the right place. So if you've added correct date information, that's going to sort it. It's going to have things based, go into the map view. You're going to see where things were captured. So there's other ways to do it, even if you don't have a very tight, granular folder structure. Now, if you want to, you can also do a little bit more granular by decade or year. And I would suggest going kind of by decades, especially the farther back you go, because if you go down all the way to a date, a lot of things are not going to fit into a specific date category. You're going to be like, well, it looks like all of these were captured in possibly the spring of 1948. And so you're going to just want to maybe put all of those things into the 40s, or even one for 1948. But don't get too granular. And again, you can break things up by different events, like family gatherings, specific vacations, school photos, and other monumental things like weddings and things like that. All right. So the next step, and it looks like I forgot to put an image in on this slide, is enhancing and decluttering those images. So when we say declutter, it's not necessarily using the declutter tool in Mylio. And the reason for that is because that tool is for handling burst mode images, which is really very tuned to digital images, things that you take in a very quick succession. You have a whole bunch that are all very similar. When we talk about decluttering our scan photos, it's removing those unnecessary images. So things that are really blurry or low quality or not very relevant to your family. So as I'm going through some of these pictures, I'm noticing that there are people that are not part of our family. People that, they were friends of my grandparents, but those aren't really relevant to me. I don't know who those people are. They're not related to me. They're not necessarily part of my story. I'm not going to tag their faces. I probably won't get rid of them, but that's really up to you. And it's a judgment call on which ones you keep. And again, with those blurry or low quality ones, sometimes you might have an image that you scanned and you have a nice high quality scan of, but maybe one of your family members also has a scan, but they took it with their cell phone and they didn't know to have it at a very high quality. They sent you that message by text. And so you have two versions of it. Keep the higher quality one. Get rid of the one that's the lower quality, so you can go through and sort through images and just kind of tidy up, declutter. So you want to focus on retaining things that are high quality and meaningful. Next is enhancing those photos. So typically when you scan an older picture, there's going to be some level of defect there, whether that's that they're a little bit faded, they might be discolored, and there might even be physical damage. So things like faded and discolored, you can actually handle a lot of that right in Mylio Photos. There's a couple of really great tools I'll show you shortly. If things are damaged, that's probably where you're going to want to jump out to a third-party application for fixing scratches and tears and things like that. I personally will jump to Photoshop, but there are other tools like Luminar Neo has an erase tool that can help you with some of those things. If I'm fixing things like a really low resolution image that I need to make bigger, or it's got a lot of visual noise in it, so a lot of grain from film. Maybe it's a bit blurry. I also like to use Topaz Photo AI. That's another great tool. Topaz also makes another one called Gigapixel, which is fantastic. I will say that that one takes a much more powerful computer. So if you're running an older machine, it might not be the best fit for you because it is very resource intense. So those are just some of the things that I think about when I'm enhancing those photos. So before we jump into questions, let's go into Mylio. And I'm going to start organizing some of my pictures. So we're going to take these steps that we just talked about and put them into a practical thing here. So what I did earlier today was scan in some images, and I'm going to go ahead and just pull up my Finder here. And they're in my pictures folder, and I put them in a folder called HP Scans. And I did these on my flatbed scanner because these came out of an album that is, well, it's actually larger than the flatbed on my multifunction printer scanner machine. It's also, these pictures were, many of them were in with those tiny little photo corners. So some of them I could pull out, but they're very difficult to get back in. And this is a beautiful album. Whoever put this album together did a fabulous job. So I don't want to ruin it. And the other thing is some of those things were actually glued in. There are a lot of newspaper clippings and things that there's no way I'm going to get them off of those pages. So what I decided to do was take that album apart page by page and lay those on my flatbed scanner. And I had to reposition things a few times, sometimes turn the page upside down, change where it was on the scanner just to be able to get a specific image fully onto the reader so it could be scanned. So a lot of my images here, you'll notice that one's upside down. Many of them are upside down or sideways. So there's things that I'm going to have to fix here as I bring them in. But these are just fresh off the scanner just this morning, and they are not yet in Mylio. So there's a couple of different ways that I could get these into Mylio Photos. I can link this folder, tell Mylio, hey, here's a new location for you to watch. Or I can copy these in to a folder that already exists. I could also grab these images. I could just Command or Control A and drag them into the Mylio inbox. All of those are acceptable. What I'm going to do is copy them into my existing family history folder. So I'm here in Mylio. I'm going to go up here to the Add Media, and we're going to go to Add Media Accessible from this device. Go to Pictures. There's that HP Scans. Just select the top level folder, and we'll say Open. And in this instance, I am going to copy them, and I want to copy them to a specific location. So I have a folder called Scan Family Photos, and I have different folders inside of this. Now, I've got these broken down by the different albums that I've scanned in. That's kind of how I've been doing this so far. Actually, that's not the one I want. There's one I have up here called Family History. That's the one I want. So here's my family history, my two sides of the family. This is going to be in the Campbell family. Here's those albums I was mentioning. So what I'm going to do is click on Campbell family, and I'm going to say New Folder. And I'm going to call this Robert A. Campbell, because this album is, somebody put this together as a gift for my grandfather, and it was a This Is Your Life. It's a phenomenal album. So I'm just going to call this Robert A. Campbell. And you can even use categories here, and we can say this is going to be family history and choose create. So now we have our new folder that we created inside of a folder that Mylio already is aware of. So we've selected it, and go ahead and choose select. So now you'll see here's my path. I'm going to take those pictures and copy them into this location. We've added the category family history. We can assign, that is just to the folder. We can assign categories to the individual images if we like. I do have it set to exclude suspected duplicates. That's always a good thing to do. It will only detect exact duplicates, so that's something worth knowing. If you wanted to, after they've been added, you could delete them from that original location. I'm going to not do that, because if for some reason this import were to get interrupted, let's say my power went out, my computer crashed, something unexpected happens in the middle of that, if you're in the process of deleting them and that process is not yet complete, you do have the chance that you might lose something. It's kind of a far-fetched scenario, but it can happen. So I prefer to leave them where they are, and I can deal with those original ones later. We can go down here to show advanced settings. I'm actually going to turn off this IPTC card on import, because these are not my photos. These are pictures that somebody else took. I don't have the copyright on them, so I'm going to turn off my IPTC. You can rename them here. I'm going to go ahead and keep existing file names. And you can go ahead and change the folder organization. And I'm just going to add the contents of selected folder. Now you can go ahead and add the folder name to keywords if you like. Mine just says HP scans. It's not very descriptive, so I'm going to leave that off. And you can add other keywords here if you like. So I don't need to add anything else. I'm going to go ahead and just say copy now. And that's going to start bringing those in to my Mylio Photos library. Now, if I go here to my top level here, you can see they're starting to come in and they're coming in at the top because since I scanned them today, they all have today's date on them. So what I want to do is I'm just going to go ahead and double click on this first one here, and I'm going to choose show in folder. And that's going to jump me directly to this folder where all of these images are coming in. And now we can start organizing them. If we go over here to look at our folder structure, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the filters for a second. You can see we're in that Robert A. Campbell folder, and these images are now coming into Mylio Photos. While that's happening, let me go ahead and take a look at the chat because I have seen a few things popping up here. Make sure that we're answering questions. All right, Lisa says for folder structure, to keep less layers, if I date the photo for 1948, rather than creating a folder for an event or an activity, could I just add it to keywords? Absolutely. That is a great idea. She also asks for enhancing and decluttering. What actual workflow do you use? Like, do you divide to go by good to go, needs simple editing, needs measure editing in one session, then tackle each group later? Or do you work on one photo or the whole process? Okay, this is a big question. And it really depends on how much time I have to work at any given moment on this project. So to just kind of give a little bit more context, this album, I'm only about a third of the way through scanning it. Maybe not even that far. It's a big album. And I didn't have time to scan every single page this morning. What I would do here is I will go through, first of all, my first pass. I'm going to go ahead and rotate these so they're at least the right orientation. And I'm going to turn off my edit tools here so I don't have those in the way. Get that out of the way as well. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. As far as decluttering and comparing to other things in my library, that's kind of an ongoing thing because typically if I have a similar photo, it's going to be probably in another place in my library. And I'm not going to find it until I'm browsing around and going, oh, that's really similar to that. And you know what? That's a better quality image. Let me keep this one and get rid of that one. So it's kind of an ongoing process for the decluttering. But let's go ahead and start with these newspaper clippings. So like I said, this album is a mix of all sorts of memorabilia. And I'm just going to go ahead and click the rotate left here, get that straight. And I can do many of these at once. So a lot of these are the same, amount of crooked. I can go ahead and just hit those at the same time. This one here, some of these are different, and it really depended on how I had to put them into the scanner in order to be able to scan the entire document, because some of them were quite large. Some of them were in awkward places on the page. So it just depends on, how they were in there. So those two are completely upside down. This one here, we need to click it a couple of times. And this is going to be my first pass. I'll go through these here really quick and get these straightened out. Let's see, these ones here are all upside down. I can do those all at once. And let's see here. There's another one upside down, upside down. And this is probably also why I only scanned about 30 images this morning, because I didn't want to keep you guys too long doing kind of mundane things like this, but you get the idea. And this kind of gets you started. Then what I do is if there's context inside that album that gives me dates, I will kind of grab that date range and go ahead and apply those. If I don't know anything right up front, I'll just do a Command or Control A, and I'll go ahead into my info panel. And here under date created, I'm just going to shift these all to undated because I don't know when any of these happen, but I know they weren't today. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save, and that's going to move everything into the undated category. With all of these ones that are newspaper clippings or not photos, I'm going to go ahead and grab those and I'm going to assign these to my grandfather's collection. So some of them are, this one here is pretty obvious. You're going to be able to tag him and his face here. But I also want to just reference that these are kind of more document style. I scan them as TIFFs. So they are an image file, but they're more of a document. So what I want to do is go down here to people. And under other people, you can associate a document or something that's just text with a specific person. So I can go ahead and click on this and type in Robert Campbell, there he is. And now I've associated all of those newspaper clippings with his name. So if I now go over to my people view, and so let's see here, let me go ahead and top level here, and we're going to type in Robert, and there he is. If I go back here into the history, back here to my untagged, you'll see there's those same newspaper clippings in with his stuff. So some of them, there is a picture that he's in, but newspaper clippings are kind of hard to face tag. The AI struggles. So that's where I would go next with these. Let me go ahead and go back to the folder here. The next kind of pass that I would do here is take a look for anything that has date information on it. So a lot of times pictures with these kind of borders, if we look closely, sometimes they have a date of when they were processed in there. This one doesn't. And then some of them have handwritten notes. So like this one here, this has 1925. So we can go here, instead of undated, we can change this to a year. And we can go ahead, and I'm just going to go ahead and put it to 2024, and then I can type in 1925. So now that's going to be showing up in 1925 in my calendar. So as I gather that information, I can go ahead and get that into the right place. Next, what I would do is potentially start adding a little bit of visual enhancement to these images. So let's take one. Let's see what we've got here. Find one that's a good candidate. Most of these are black and white. If you have color images, there's two different tools that are really helpful for these types of images. Let's go ahead and take this wedding photo here. It's a black and white, and it is very faded. So we can go here into our edit tools. And for the most part, you're going to just need to stick up here at the top for things that don't have physical damage that you have to go to another application for. If it's a color image that has some sort of discoloration, auto color will do a great job. If it's a black and white, you can go ahead and just do auto tone, and that adds a little bit of extra pop to that image. Now, if you wanted to, you could go ahead and crop in this image, make that border a little bit better if you chose. You could also, this has a little bit of color still left in it because it yellowed. You can see those little photo corners on there because I didn't pull them off the page. You can go down here to color, and you can actually just pull that saturation down or click the black and white here, and that's going to give you a true black and white. So you don't have to do a whole lot to make that look better. So here's where we started, and just a couple clicks, it looks better. And this is the version that I'd rather share with my family. So when I start putting together the album in Mylio that I'm going to do the shared album with, this is the version that I'm going to send, not that slightly faded version, because that just looks a lot better. Same with this one. Again, it's a cool picture. It's very faded. I'm not sure who that is. I think that might be my grandma's parents. I'm not sure, but I know that's my grandpa right there. So I can, again, if I want to, I can just convert this to black and white, and that pulls any residual color out of it, and then go back up here to the auto tone. And that made it a little too dark, so you can always go down here and either pull up the exposure or just pull up the shadows a little bit to bring back a little bit more of that detail. So that's what I do in organizing these. It's not, it's probably not as methodical as somebody who's a professional photo manager would do. They probably have a much more systematic approach, but this is how I approach my own photos. I gather the information that I can, I organize what I can, and then as I have time, I go sit down with my grandma, I sit down with my mom, I sit down with my aunties, and I get additional context and information about the photos, and I add those. And that's what's beautiful about Mylio, is because I can access all of these photos once they're in my library from my phone or my iPad, no matter where I'm at. So that to me is where this becomes very, very powerful. All right, let's say here, we've got a couple more questions. We often name pics or folders the last name, first name, and doing genealogy. Would you not carry that practice over into this? You absolutely can. So if that's your method, you can absolutely do this. The reason that I don't do that with folders is because pictures like this often have more than one person. So whose folder do you put it into? If, like I said, I think this is my grandma's parents here with my grandfather. I'm not 100% sure on that. I could be wrong. So those might be his parents. I'd have to go back and look. Whose folder do you put those into? And that's where I run into trouble. And so that's why I kind of keep it, right now at least, I have it grouped by those albums that I'm going through. Eventually, I probably will break those down into decades just to make them a little bit more browsable. But for now, I'm keeping them organized by the album that I'm taking apart and scanning. And then I will make that a little bit more organized later. So it's a bit of a process, and you have to think through whatever process works best for you. Working on family history for me is a lot of fun, but it's not something I have a ton of time to do. And when I do sit down to do it, it takes quite a bit of effort. So you just have to kind of keep that in mind and do it in small, little manageable chunks and chip away at those details as you can. Now, if you're a professional and you're doing this very methodically, or, this is a very, very serious hobby for you, having a more detailed folder structure is absolutely acceptable. It's just what works best for you. All right, let's see here. Are there any hands up or any other questions in the chat here? Let me go ahead and take a look here. Lisa says, any tips for working with the scanned images that have been imported and are in many random folders? So I've had that, I'm working through that myself right now. So I've got my main repository, so to speak, here. I also have in my main photos folder for all of my pictures, I also have this other scan family photos. And this is where I've been dropping things for many years, and it's very disorganized. Some of it is my own pictures from when I shot film when I was younger. Some of them are much older, like I've got my mom and dad's wedding in here. I am incrementally integrating those into my main family history folder as I get going. Now, my cutoff for what goes in family history versus going into my main organization here is who took the picture. If I took the picture and it's my photos, those I'm putting here into this category, whether I shot them on film, whether I shot them with digital. If they were pictures that were taken before my time or when I was very little, not taken by me, those are the ones that I'm putting into that family history hierarchy. So again, it's an arbitrary line. Some people might not want to have an arbitrary marker like that. Maybe everything goes into one major hierarchy. There's not a wrong answer, but whatever you choose to do, my suggestion is to stick with it. So you pick a system, you stick with it, because once you start there, if you decide you want to do something else, it's a pretty major task to start moving things around. As far as bringing in those random things, as I find them and I decide where I want them to be in my master hierarchy here, I will just, grab them here. Let's say here, so scan family photos. Let's take mom and dad's wedding. And I'm going to grab everything here. Actually, I'm going to go up one level here and grab that folder. And I can go here. This is where things get tricky, right? So this is my mom and dad's wedding. Does it go into my mom's side of the family or my dad's side of the family? So you can go ahead and choose. I could take this picture here and I could just put it here into family history. So I'm going to grab that folder and drag that into family history. And this will physically move it on my computer, on all of my connected hard drives, and I could reorganize these things here within Mylio. And the cool thing is I don't have to have those drives connected at the moment. I can do this from my phone, or I can do this from my iPad when I'm, out and about, or maybe sitting on the sofa in the other room. And I can start to get these things organized into a better hierarchy. I'm going to go ahead and cancel that for the moment, but you get the idea. Like, here's some earlier ones from my childhood. So I just have to decide where those go. Do they go into which branch, or do I start an even new folder inside of there for things that were taken during my lifetime? So lots of things to think about. Are there any other questions? Darren, I'm glad you enjoyed the presentation. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I want to wish you guys a wonderful Christmas, New Year's, whatever holidays you're celebrating. I hope they're fabulous. I want to encourage you to take lots of pictures, because our first coffee break in the new year is going to be organizing those holiday photos. We'll talk about, I think, a lot of the same concepts overall that we did today, but it'll be more of a digital bent and have some additional tools that we'll talk about to get those organized. So make sure you're out there making memories with those that are important to you. Do something special, and we will see you in the new year. I'm so grateful for all of you. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.